Welcome back to Celtic State of Mind. Brian, are you on the red wine already? Is that right, Peter?
No, it's Coca-Cola, just in a fancy glass.
Just the way the light's shone on it. I'm Paul John Dykes, and I'm joined today. I'm delighted to be joined in the studio by JP Mason. Welcome back, JP. And Brian Degnan. I hope you're back to full fitness, Brian. You've not been feeling too well recently.
Yep, no, passed the elite fitness test, so I'm back in the squad, back ready to start scoring again. Aye, that's me.
Love it. Now, JP, it's been a wee while since you've been in the studio.
Mm-hmm.
Have you seen anything new since you came in?
I've seen some tracky tops. I've seen a new. What did I see out there? That took my
the Italian 90 bag?
Oh, the Italian 90 bag is unbelievable. By the way, that I mean, it's got the faded, the original kind of faded look, because it is actually an original Italian 90. What is it, like a shoulder bag, isn't it?
Aye, it's been used. It's been well used. You could just tell that during the 1990s, it's been used for Sunday League football and all that,
Yeah.
With boots and shinnies.
Raljecks.
You can smell it. The liniment takes you back to a changing room.
It does.
Absolutely. Right. Loads to talk about. There's a good vibe in the studio at the moment, because another thing that JP will have seen when he came in was loads and loads of frames for the auction that we're doing for the St Mary's fundraiser. We're hurtling towards a totally, dare I say, more than we raised last year. So we raised 27k last year. And then once you do the transfer, you have a few percents here and there from GoFundMe that comes off the total, and it took it under 27 grand last time round. The difference this time round is there's one beneficiary. So it's going to St Mary's, and St Mary's only now. Canon Tom down there also looks after St Alphonsus, so the two parishes are going to benefit, which is tremendous. But it's important because it's the birthplace of Celtic. So yes, the link is underneath the video, as always. If you're able to throw in £1 or two, please do so. It'll all go to the final total. And by the way, we were talking about what to do next year. We're going to step it up even higher. The bar's going higher next year. We're going to do something bigger next year. But it just shows you the community aspect of the Celtic support coming together like that. It was a great weekend. And as I say, the auction is ongoing. I showed JP a few of the new items, so they're going to look smashing on eBay later on today. But after this, JP and I will be jumping in the motor and going through to Glasgow for the game. So let's talk about the game tonight. And the pre-match yesterday, the presser. These things sometimes, Brian, I'll come to you first. They can be quite formulaic. Who's injured? Who's going to get a start? Are you happy with this one or that one? They can go down that line, can't they? Oh, it's a dead rubber, Conference League and all that. But there was a couple of questions that they attracted tremendous answers from Ange Postecoglou, didn't they? And our very own Tony Haggerty was in the room. He asked the question around Kyogo with a view. The angle of the question was around, he's been targeted. There's a campaign here. Here's your stage, Ange, to stand up for him, and stand up for him he did, didn't he?
Oh, it was absolutely brilliant. We had got the brave warriors sitting on their couch having a go. I love his quote about mentioning he's the size of a jockey, up against these guys much bigger and getting on with it. And what I love about Ange in general, but in particular that response, was it wasn't rehearsed. It came straight from him.
Yes,
that defence, he got his back up right away. You can tell. I mean, if you're Kyogo and you hear that, you've got to think the gaffer's got me. He's absolutely got my back.
Aye.
And Postecoglou was spot on as well. I mean, it's easy for people to say, oh, maybe he's been doing a bit easy here or there, but he's getting kicked lumps out of every game. And we've spoke many a time recently about the referees, and rightly so, because the amount of challenges that are going unpunished against him in particular. So, yeah, maybe on occasion he's been doing a wee bit easy, but given the amount of fouls against him and the amount of times he's getting hit off the ball, I'm surprised he's not going down more. So, I loved it for Ange. He just comes across as such a genuine guy, doesn't he? Like, he's just someone you're really proud of to be in charge of the club. And kudos to Big Tony as well. It was a wonderfully worded question.
Oh, it was. Now, there's a couple of things to take from that. People keep saying on the podcast, they keep saying that he gets it. He definitely does get it. Now, the thing with regards to that is he seems to be from the hierarchy, as you would, the only one that's getting it at the moment, JP. I mean, he has taken to a pre-match press conference and stood up for Kyogo. Are you kind of disappointed that the club haven't stood up for him already?
I wouldn't say disappointed. I'm not surprised. I mean, they've not come out and said anything about, well, apart from the little bit of information at the AGM that we got from, was it Ian Bankier or Brian Olsen? I can't remember, about the Bernard Higgins thing. There's been silence on that. So if they're being silent about something that the majority of the support are so up in arms about, rightly so, then, you know, would we expect them to come out and make a comment on the press treatment or otherwise of Kyogo Furuhashi? Probably not. So I'm not surprised. I was really happy that it was brought up yesterday, and there's a lot of people kind of saying yesterday, would it have been brought up by the mainstream media, or, you know, is it thanks to fan media and our very own Tony Haggerty for bringing it up? Who knows? Maybe we'll never know, because Tony got in there first. I think it was one of the first questions, wasn't it? Or the second.
Yeah.
And, you know, Ange Postecoglou responded, and his quote about, you know, I don't get involved in arguments with ignorant people because you tend to become one of them if you do. And as soon as I heard him say that, I just thought, wow, I'll remember that. I mean, I know he's kind of taken a bit of a loan of a Mark Twain quote, as somebody replied to my post on Twitter, which, by the way, that the response to that I put out that last night, I mean, I very rarely put out tweets that I'm you know, making a statement or anything like that, but the response to that is indicative of how the Celtic fans feel. It's a microcosm. It's like a microcosm of what the Celtic support feel about Ange Postecoglou. You know, when you see that level of response, people don't know me. They don't care about me or me as a person. They've just seen that quote that I've put and they've responded to it. And when you see that, you just think, well, this guy is clearly got everyone's attention and has got everyone's support, as he's repeatedly said from the start. He's been at pains to say that to the media when he's been questioned about it, that he said, look, I've had the support of this club and the support of the fans since I came in the door, because they've almost seen me as like an underdog and they want me to do well. And that's kind of what we've always been and been used to being throughout most of our Celtic supporting lives. You know, it's not been all plain sailing, has it? I mean, you and I have experienced being not even the underdog, you know, being as far out of the, you know, competition as possible. So
finishing fifth, I remember finishing fifth.
Aye.
Bizarrely under Billy McNeill, the manager that I most associate my kind of youthful support of Celtic with is Billy McNeill. But there was that one season where, you know, it just didn't happen. The money that was spent, you know, didn't bear fruit, and we ended up fifth. So the trials and tribulations, but he's right in what he says. I mean, people take that view that, he's never wanted them in the first place. And, you know, you've got to actually question that, because that wasn't the situation when Ange Postecoglou was appointed. The situation was that the club had basically been led along far too long by who was obviously their first candidate, right? And that was where the frustration came from. Whoever was then lined up, you know, was almost in the shadows from day one. But at no point did anyone in Acsom say, what are we, you know, appointing this guy for, or, you know, it's a disaster or any of this. Because I've seen that on Twitter as well, that people are saying, well, you know, you wouldn't give him any credit when we appointed him. That wasn't the case. I think the frustration at that point was the way the club went about it. And then it didn't really give Ange much of an opportunity in the early days to put his stamp on the side. I mean, you just have to look at the Midtjylland lineup. And he mentioned this yesterday as well, how well we've done in Europe when you consider we've gone into that game totally underprepared. I mean, we covered all the friendly matches, Brian. You think back to, you know, Sheffield Wednesday, and it was Bristol City that we played. And, you know, we were coming up against teams, and fair enough, the results weren't too bad until we came up against West Ham. I think West Ham have gone on to show that they're not a bad side. But we were really poor. You look at the lineup, the guys that were playing, and then once it came out to the Midtjylland game, and you look at the two centre halves we had, and then, you know, we beat on being sent off, Murray having to come in. So I don't think we were ever disillusioned by Ange Postecoglou. It was the whole scenario that was the frustrating part of it. But what I liked about Ange is that it wasn't a contrived kind of answer. the question that's been raised a few times, would it have been asked had Tony no asked it? And there's always this alternative media against mainstream media thing that's constant. And I don't entirely buy into that, I've got to say, right? Because I have met some phenomenal people who are brilliant journalists who work for mainstream titles. And obviously, if your profession is, when you go and study journalism, that you want to be a journalist or a broadcast journalist or a commentator or work in the media, then you are generally going to do that for a mainstream outlet. So it doesn't make them bad people. Now, I know that there are some bad eggs in there that we probably all don't like, but there's some cracking people in there as well. And I think that Tony Haggerty was one of them before he left the mainstream role that he had. And that's why Tony and I remained in contact, and eventually he comes on to Acsom. He's added a lot to Celtic State of Mind. But there's others out there. Alison McConnell, brilliant journalist. Hugh McDonald, Kevin McKenna, Stephen McGowan, all brilliant journalists. And I don't think that there is an agenda that exists within that hardcore. But what we did see, Brian, over the last few weeks was a narrative. And the narrative was that Kyogo was a cheat. And, that for me is something that we actually called a few months ago. We realised that he's going to get a hard time because of the nature of him going down from time to time. And we knew, and I think one of the headlines was, is he going to be targeted? Well, that's exactly what's happened. And then once that narrative starts, and once the head of referees comes out to try and talk about a goal that shouldn't have been chopped off, all of a sudden, he's public enemy number one. And what he's bringing to the Scottish game is incredible. It's positive. You look at what he's brought to the Scottish game. And yeah, with Ange's links in January, a few more players are going to come here. But what must they be thinking? The first thing that happened was he was a target of racist abuse, right? Then the referees have got it in for him because the head of referees is coming out saying that should have been disallowed. So straight away, in the back of the minds of the people that he's the head of, when it's a marginal call, as we've seen at the weekend, it's going to go against them, right? And then the media, and I say the media, not all the guys I've just mentioned there, but the narrative that we were seeing in the media is that he was a cheat. And he must be thinking, what on earth, where have I landed here? So Brian, I'll bring it to you. How is that going to affect Kyogo? Will it affect Kyogo?
I don't think it'll affect him personally. It seems, he's got good people around him. Obviously, Ange will put his arm around him and defend him. But in terms of sorry.
That was a bit of an Ange cough there, actually.
That was a bit of an Ange cough. I'm trying to get more and more like him every day. I'm trying to put on weight purposely, so I look more like Ange. It's honestly not an accident. I'm honestly not being lazy. But in terms of the media, look, conflict breeds interest, right? So they make these headlines up. Kyogo was a diver, so that fans the Flames and gets people to click their articles and buy their papers. So you're always going to be up against that. So I actually don't really. It doesn't really bother me when I see it in the media because I think I know why they're doing it. It doesn't really when pundits or so-called pundits are being completely unbiased and shouting about this and that. I think that's really poor and really unprofessional. And speaking of poor and unprofessional, the head of referees coming out. Mm-hmm. What's he talking about? Why is he coming out to make a comment on that one goal? We have all the decisions the referees have been shambolic about this season.
Yeah.
Why is he coming out to highlight that?
Exactly.
I mean, that's
especially on the back. I mean, you're talking about the decisions. I've started making the list, and it's going to be the dirty dozen before you know it, right? Now, the latest one was obviously Butcher on Turnbull, which was shocking. Shocking. Could it be honest, right? Because my answer to this is no. If I had asked you 2 weeks ago who the head of referees were in Scotland, could you have told me it was him?
No.
I couldn't have either.
No, he's totally ineffective. And then he chooses to pop his head up, make a ridiculous comment, further highlight Kyogo, and then disappear under a rock again when there's hard decisions to be made. It's I think the guy's embarrassed himself, but to be honest, like as you say, the fact so many people had no idea who he was is indicative of the problem, really, isn't it?
It is, and as I say, we are listing the misdemeanours, and people are adding to it as well. And at the moment, there's 7. I thought there was only 6. In fact, there's 8. We're up to 8, JP. I'd forgotten about Ryan Porteous trying to break the shin bone of Callum McGregor at Easter Road. So we're up to 8 now. But on the subject of Hibs, let's jump over to the Hibs situation at the moment, because we've got them in the cup final. We'll come back to the potential lineup tonight, but I was kind of surprised when I came in this morning Jack Ross had been sacked. I know they've not been great in the league, but I think that's a bit premature.
I was quite shocked about it as well. I thought that he was not in with the bricks there, but I thought that he was onto a safe number really at Hibs. I didn't foresee that coming at all. I know they got beat at Livingston, but so did we. And Ange Postecoglou lived to fight another day. But I haven't really been paying attention to Hibs league form. I know they got beat at home off Rangers. A very, soft penalty. I think I did say it was a penalty, but if you're talking about comparing it to Kyogo Furuhashi getting smacked in the back of the head and then going down, Ryan Kent feels the touch and goes, "Oh, I've got a penalty here. I'm going down." And that's how they lost the game. I'm pretty sure I saw a lot of people saying that Hibs should have won that game or at least got a point. And the penalty and the result was harsh on them. So to then lose at Livingston and then find out, I mean, I saw murmurings of this last night, people saying Jack Ross to go in the morning and all that. And it was like, so people already knew last night before it was made official this morning. And yeah, you just wonder, they must have a plan for who's going to come in place. There's no way they would be so knee-jerk if they didn't have someone lined up. And I saw plenty of comical parody kind of announcements of Neil Lennon returning as manager at Hibs, but I think there's probably slim chance of that given the way they departed in the first place. So we'll wait and see and wonder if there will be a new permanent manager in place when we take them on in the cup final.
Exactly, which is the reason we're discussing it, because the big question is, JP, what does it do? I mean, you do get, and it's a cliche these days, the new manager bounce. Sometimes you don't get that. Will they have somebody in within the next 10 days to lead them into the Scottish Cup?
So, yeah.
And if so, I mean, what does that do? Is it going to benefit them? Because I guess it depends on the individual. We've seen names flying about. The thing for me with Neil Lennon, obviously, I think it's widely known there was an issue there between Neil Lennon and Leanne Dempster, wasn't there? And by the way, I think it won't be too long before he gets back into football, Neil Lennon. I do think he will get back into football. I think that the dust has started to settle on everything that happened last season. Whether or not it's going to be in Scottish football, I'm not sure. There's only a few clubs I think he could manage in Scotland, and he's already managed them. I'm not sure where else Lenny could go in Scotland, but certainly I've seen him linked, I think, to the Ipswich Town job this morning. So, and when he does, you wish him all the best. You wish Lenny all the best once that day comes. So how do you think it affects Hibs? If they were to bring somebody in, and we've seen a few names flying about, some high caliber coaches and managers, JP, I'm thinking from a Celtic perspective, does it give them a wee edge against us?
I mean, you've seen what's happened at Rangers, like obviously Van Bronckhorst going in has, galvanised a team and a squad that were, coming out and saying they didn't have any hunger and they were chucking games at 3-1 down at half time, ironically against Hibs. So, it can go one of two ways. I guess it just depends who they get and whether or not he clicks straight away with the squad. I got the feeling, I think I watched the interview with Ryan Porteous even yesterday or the day before, where he was being asked if he would change his style, and he was pretty. He mentioned the manager and he was complimentary towards Jack Ross. So it doesn't seem to me like there was any kind of player revolt that's led to this. It must have been a decision from the top, and like I said, they probably have someone lined up to come in to replace him, because you and I spoke before we went on air. It seemed a bit rash. It seems a bit kind of not harsh, but it just seems a bit knee-jerk. They
didn't hang around anyway. That's for sure. I mean, it would be kind of box office if Lenny took over and led them onto the field. I mean, come on, Scottish football. They'd maybe sell the tickets that they've not been selling. Brian, what's your thoughts? What's it going to do for us as Celtic? We're all about the Celtic, of course. And saying that, when JP came in today, we've got a framed tea towel. It's official Proclaimers merchandise. It's just been framed, and it's the lyrics of Sunshine on Leith, because obviously the Proclaimers are big Hibbies, but that's out there. But what does it do for us going into this cup final? I mean, I'm already confident at this moment in time. I just think that we're in that groove, regardless of what happens tonight, regardless of what type of team we put out tonight. I'm kind of confident that we're good. We've got enough to overcome Hibs. And, even if a manager comes in, it's not like a magic wand. They don't always get that instant improvement. There's some fantastic players in that Hibs side, but they've not shown it as much this season as they did last. But my biggest surprise was, you look at last season, cup final, third in the league. I think it was the first time in the highest position in 15 years. I think since maybe Tony Mowbray was in charge of them. So it seems a wee bit premature for me. Would you agree with JP? They've maybe got somebody already lined up? They've
got to have, because there's no way you can sack a manager a week before a cup final if you don't have a backup. It would be very, very strange. In regards to how it affects us, if they've got someone in place, by today, and that's a plan in place, you might find the players get that bounce. And they'll have a game at the weekend, and then obviously the second game will be the League Cup final. So you would expect them to come out, you'd expect them to come out and go for it because it's a final anyway. But if they've got a new manager, you can imagine that gives them a sort of galvanisation. They're almost in a can't lose position, because if they do lose, it goes, well, we beat off Celtic and we've got a new boss. Mm-hmm. But they've got a lot to win, we've got a chance to get the fans back inside. The new manager makes his claim. In terms of Celtic, though, I don't see it's going to affect. I don't think Ange prepares the team to, other than to play his way. Mm-hmm. I don't think he cares who he's against. I think he sets the team up to win, to play well, to control the game. And I think, just like Dundee United the other day, we're almost making teams look poor because we're so in control of games. And I think it's more about what we do in the game. And I don't think it affects us. I'm pretty confident as well. I think we've looked resilient recently. I'm so confident we're just not going to get beat. It looks like the team are really together on it. And I think it'll be the same in the cup final. So Hibs, I expect somebody to be in by the end of today, probably, or announced tomorrow morning. And in terms of Celtic, I don't see that it changes. I still think we'll beat them. I think they should go for Callum Davidson. I think there's only so much he could do, and he's done it at St Johnstone. So it'd be a good move for him. As well. He's done a good job with St Mirren. He needs to go to Sunderland first, though, no? Nah, maybe. Now, if we're looking at that cup final, I always make comparisons, JP, to Wim Jansen. In the season that we had under Wim Jansen, where we win the Coca-Cola Cup, there's a galvanising effect, like Brian says there, in the team. But there's so many newbies. There's so many new players in that Celtic side. It would be fantastic to see the likes of Starfelt and Carter Vickers and all these guys. Unfortunately, we're not going to see Jota on the park. But winning silverware for Celtic, and then that can kick us on, obviously, to the New Year's game and beyond.
I mean, just listening to you being confident about the League Cup final, I mean, I have very, very firm memories of the League Cup final in '94 at Ibrox against Wraith Rovers. I was pretty confident going into that game, and we know what happened. So I would never, ever go into a cup final being like, yeah, we're going to squish this. The same with that Dundee United final, actually, in '97. Like, I remember being in Glasgow that day with my pal Michael, and he had the ticket for the game and I didn't, and I was hoping against hope that I would get one, and then I didn't, and I ended up watching it in the Hoops bar, and I was well oiled, shall we say, by the time he rejoined me after the game, and we stayed there till last train to Edinburgh, and it was a hell of a night. But that did kickstart that season, and really, I guess, gave a lot of the guys in that team the belief that they could win something, and that definitely must have played a part in the run-in, even although at times we were pretty bad. We threw away points, but then there was the pressure of that season. You've got to remember what was on those players that season, and it was so big. But that League Cup was, I think, was a huge marker at that point, and I certainly remember it fondly because it was the first time I'd seen a Celtic team win a cup final in style, because the 1-0 game against Airdrie in '95 was a drab affair. So at least in that final against Dundee United, I mean, we won it comfortably. There was no last minute goals or penalty shootouts or anything like that. It was an emphatic win, and it really set a marker down. So I mean, I'd like to think we'd be able to do that in the 19th, but I'll always have that a level of caution.
No, that's fair dues. Having suffered that Wraith Rovers debacle myself, that is fair dues. But I do remember that Airdrie one because I've told the story where the guy was trying to get me to go in the park after the game, try to push me on the park and invade the pitch. And then later on, when I'm watching the VHS at home, the same guy, he's getting lifted and he's huckled and his arms up there. So I was kind of glad I was in the house watching that rather than getting a night in the cells. I was only 15, I think. But back to tonight then. Back to tonight. The big question is, how do we do this? Do we rest the vast majority of the important players who have all played a lot of football? Do we bring in a hybrid side where there's maybe 4 or 5? Brian, how does Ange play this tonight?
I would expect the sort of hybrid option because although it's just, it's essentially a dead rubber, right? And that it doesn't matter about the result because of the group standings. However, you still get about £500,000 for a win in Europe in the group stages. So that's a lot of money for Celtic. There's also coefficient points depending how, what happens next season with Europe. So there's still a lot to play for, and there's still people paid their money to go and see the games. So
yeah,
I don't think Ange is going to set out aside accepting to get beat. I don't think he'll do wholesale changes because I think he would probably see that as not doing the job. However, I do think there's guys that need time, and it's a perfect opportunity. So, for instance, I would probably... Is J. Marcus fit yet?
No.
I mean, this would be a question.
There certainly was no update, Brian. Ange was too busy defending Kyogo to talk about Giacomakis yesterday. But no, I don't think he's going to be available tonight.
Actually, Guy Kyogo arrest for Sunday.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
One of the things Ange said was that it's now his 11th month playing football, which is insane when you think about it. Mm-hmm. So you can see maybe that's why he's snatched a few chances recently. I think Scales will come in left back. I think he's merited himself a start. I would imagine Beaton, McCarthy will play. Calmack will probably get a rest. But other than that, where else can you change? Because although we've got a few options in the bench now, we don't have that big a squad depth to make wholesale changes. So, I mean, I don't think they're going to see the B team getting called up to play tonight. So, again, maybe you might see like a midfielder, Sorrell, McCarthy, Beaton, Scales at left back, and that'll probably be it, I think.
What's your thoughts, Brian, before I come to JP on that, I agree with you, the guys that are playing week in, week out, give them a rest, right? What's your thoughts on Joe Hart and goals? Does he need a rest? Do you need to get game time into somebody in case they need to be called upon later on in the season?
No, I mean, I think with keepers, listen, it's rarer that a keeper gets injured than an outfield player, isn't it? And I think having the continuity at the back's key for us. We spoke a lot about how he has a calmness with the back four, and especially if you're going to be making changes at the back, you probably want that continuity. So I don't know that I would switch out Joe Hart. And the other reason is as well, say you put one of the younger keepers in, I can always say the boy's name wrong, the England under 19 player, so I'm not going to attempt it.
Toby.
Olivimia. There we go. Well done, lads. But the thing is, you put him in goals tonight and we shot 4 goals on his debut. Mm-hmm. That's crushing. So Joe Hart is somebody I wouldn't consider changing. Not tonight.
Well, JP, I agree with Brian. I think that there are some players that just play week in, week out. I think Kyogo would play 3 games a week if he was asked to, but he definitely needs a rest. McGregor, I think now's the time, give him a rest. Don't rest him against Ross County in the League Cup as we did last year. Rest them in a game like tonight, even though, as Brian says, it is important for a number of reasons that we don't see this as a dead rubber. There should be no such thing as a dead rubber. How do we line up tonight, in your opinion, JP?
Well, you just look back to last season and the last Europa League game last season, where it was a dead rubber, and we played Lille at home, and we, guys staked their claim in that game, and it led to them, having a run in the team. Like Turnbull, obviously that was his kind of coming of age game, really, in a Celtic shirt, and everyone's going, "Oh, why was he not playing before that?" And there was reasons for that. I don't think it was because he wasn't doing the business and training or anything like that. I think it was just, they were probably managing his return to fitness after a long time out. But if you look back to that game, it's strange because that dead rubber, if you compare our previous results last year to our results this year, we've gone toe-to-toe Real Betis away. We've gone toe-to-toe with Bayer Leverkusen away and been beaten by an odd goal in a 4-3 and was it 4-3? It was 4-3, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Betis. 4-3 and a 3-2, which is getting beat, yes, but at least it's getting beat, throwing some punches rather than just sort of meekly surrendering like we did against Sparta Prague.
Mm-hmm.
And, I know we went up 2-0 in the San Siro and then subsequently got beat. Am I wrong? Is that right? Have I made that up? Yeah. So we did have a go a bit against them, but the spankings against Sparta Prague last season was our Ferencváros this season, and look at the results. The difference is we beat the side home and away that we were supposed to beat, and we also went up against the other sides in those games. So it's quite weird to see how that progress has been made in a year with almost a completely different team. And so tonight, I don't know about the wholesale changes or anything like that. I would like to see a team that's put out there that knows the system and that knows how to play the way that he wants to play. And you'd like to think that anybody he puts in will know that now, because they've been getting trained and drilled under his tutelage since the start of the season. So if he does put out a sort of fragmented looking side tonight with players playing, that haven't played together or whatever, then it's a different case. It's a different scenario doing that tonight than it would be doing it 3 or 4 months ago, because the training has been implemented and people know what they need to do and where they need to be on the park. So it's all about it's kind of over to the players at that point, because he's done everything he can in terms of building the structure and the training regime and everything else. So it's up to the players to take their opportunity tonight. And if that is Albion Ayeti, then why would you've got a huge stage, a sold out Celtic Park, why would you not want to perform at your very best? And I really hope that the guys that come in do that, because you don't like to see people failing on a big stage. And it is still a big stage because it's a sold out European game under the lights at Celtic Park at the end of the day.
The thing is, I'm sitting here, I can't wait to actually jump in that motor and go through. There is this whole process. Everybody going to the game will be going through right now. They'll be travelling over from Ireland, in their droves. And there is that responsibility for Celtic to actually put on that show, regardless of whether or not we're going to qualify. We want to do as best as we possibly can. A player like Ayeti coming in, there might be other reasons why he wants to put in a good performance. Is he looking to get a move in January? Or Celtic looking to move him on? If so, go and prove what you can do. Because, his stock has dropped since he came in from West Ham, and it had already dropped at West Ham. So absolutely, JP, if that is what he decides to do, I would much rather he did that and gave Kyogo a rest, to be honest with you. I'm going to drag in some of the comments because I appreciate every single person that's tuning in to a Celtic State of Mind bulletins. We've got big plans for 2022. The bulletin will remain. We've got Team Acsom dialing in, and that's tremendous. But we've got other shows with an Acsom flavour coming your way in 2022. So get subscribing on YouTube. We are putting out content every single day. Now, Paddy Lavery, thank you very much. Very loyal follower of the show. Good afternoon, Paul and JP. And of course, Brian, because you came in as well, Brian. So good afternoon to you. Matthew Duff points out on YouTube, Tony posing 2 fantastic questions to Ange yesterday afternoon. And it just shows you how these things can go down on social media. I think that went viral. And you look at the news sources that were all using that response about Kyogo that Tony posed. So brilliant questions by Tony, absolutely. The other one that might have been put in the shadows, understandably, was he was talking about the academy and how, generally week to week, we've got about half a dozen players in and around that first team. Montgomery, Ralston, Forrest McGregor, Mikey Johnson and Stephen Welsh. So although all the talks around the transfers in January, and of course we do require new bodies in, he's not overlooking the academy prospects, and that must give some of the young guys great confidence. Brian, Rocco Vata, for example, Lawal, who's looking really good, playing for the B team. wee Moffat. We've seen some of him in pre-season. So it was important that that was posed to Ange, and Ange seems to be willing to give them a chance if they've got the fibre for it.
Yeah, I love that. I thought it was excellent. We had spoke a few weeks back about the need for structure at the club in terms of continuity from academy to first team, and it's the first time it's really been addressed by anyone from Celtic, specifically Ange, and I thought he answered well, talking about, and JP touched on it as well, the players that maybe haven't featured have been training, they know how to play, they know how the system works, and it appears as if he's in constant communication with Chris Picard and the staff there that he mentioned, and trying to get that, trying to get these players on board with that style of play so that they can start to have we didn't say pathway, but essentially a pathway through to the first team. Name check guys like Dane Murray and stuff like that, and obviously, I'm a massive fan of Big Dane. I think he's huge potential. So I was really enthused by it. I thought it was really, really good to hear them actually saying, I still see the academy as the future of the club. We're not going to be, splashing out, in his words. And it feels like, because he mentioned the restructure as well, and it feels like that's going to be key moving forward over the next few years is actually getting, young players playing a system that they can slot straight in.
Yeah.
And if we can start to bring through, strikers again and wingers, proper wingers again, it's just going to be brilliant. So I'm really excited about the future. You just hope whatever plans are in place are there for the long term, regardless of Ange. We spoke with the cycle management.
Yeah. And
if you go by previous, you've probably got 3 years of the big fella. But what we need is 10 years worth of continuity to bring academy graduates through and into the first team, and that has to continue, and I hope it will.
I hope so. And like JP was saying, last year's Dead Rubber gave us David Turnbull. I know that he had played a few games, but that was really the introduction, and he went on to win the Young Player of the Year, JP. That night again, Sorrow, I thought Sorrow looked a tremendous talent that night, and it was Connor Hazard in goals. Ewan Henderson, I think, came on as a sub that night as well, and they all played really well. So tonight might be the stage for someone else to stake a claim and put themselves either in the shop window for others or for Ange. Martin Bickett, hail, hail, well done, Acsom. Well done everybody who's been involved, because we simply provide a platform for these things, and the amount of people who have contributed and the amount of podcasts who have come on board, some of them were in the studio, it was just tremendous. We're still feeling it on the Thursday following the weekender, and we're still raising cash, and I'll tell you, if we can get to 27 or 28 grand, that is going to make a huge difference down at St Mary's as well. So thanks everybody for getting involved. We've got Lanky67, good afternoon troops, hail hail. Donny's asking, are we all looking forward to the game tonight? I'm buzzing. I mean, it might be, I always am. JP, I used to buzz when it was 1991 and Cascarino was leading the line. So if I was buzzing then, I'm buzzing tonight. Feed the Bear, always in on the comments. Welcome to the show. Afternoon, everybody. And the Underwater Cabbage Salesman, whatever you say, I'm going to bring you up for that name. Hail, hail, comrades. Absolutely. This brings me on to the next point here of discussion. I'll come back to Turnbull because that obviously allows us to speak about that tackle at the weekend. Richard Murray, whose avatar looks strikingly like Cathkin Park. For anybody out there who's never visited Cathkin, go and have a look at Cathkin Park. It's incredible. It's the kind of thing you would get somebody putting a YouTube video up, JP, about kind of ghost stadiums, because the terracing's still there. There's a wee white wall behind one of the goals that if you look at the old images from the 1950s of like Gil Heron, his dad, Gilbert Heron, playing for Third Lanark, you can still see that same white wall and it's still there, still stands. And it's obviously the home as well of the Jimmy Johnson Academy, our friends at the Jimmy Johnson Academy as well. Richard says, is it right or wrong to have a silent protest inside the ground tonight? I can see both points, so a tough one. Well, I was looking at this yesterday because obviously there was a follow-up statement, JP, simply due to the fact that a letter was sent out to the CEO, Michael Nicholson. And one thing I would say is that a lot of the stuff I was reading online last night was, they don't speak for us. We hear that all the time. But this letter wasn't from the Green Brigade. It wasn't from the Celtic Trust. It wasn't from Boys, or it wasn't from any of these singular organisations. It was signed by over 250 signatories. And that was Celtic supporters clubs, affiliations, the Trust, the Association, podcasts like Acsom, and so on and so forth. And just so that people understand, to have a Celtic supporters club, JP, you don't have to be part of the association or the affiliation. So they look after a great many. So the affiliation look after Celtic supporters clubs outside the Glasgow area, and the association are more kind of Glasgow based. And then you've got individual Celtic supporters clubs from all over the place. So the fact that actually represented tens of thousands of Celtic fans made it a wee bit different from a protest by one or two groups. It was a coming together, it was a collective, it was a message where everybody got behind this message in terms of the groups that were out there, the associations, the podcasts. But everybody that signed it also realises, JP, you don't speak for every individual Celtic fan who has an opinion on the matter. And the reason that letter was written in the first place was because there were rumours, although they've not been confirmed by the club, pretty strong rumours that Bernard Higgins was lined up to take a senior role at Celtic. And basically what that would suggest is that they're going to take a hard line on our ultras at Celtic Park. I mean, let's not beat about the bush. That's exactly why this is happening, right? There's nobody strong enough at Celtic to deal with it, in my opinion. Peter Lawwell was a very strong character, regardless of what you thought of him. But he was someone who could deal with just about anything that was thrown at the club. I don't think we have a figure like that at Celtic at the moment. So they're bringing in someone on a senior kind of role. And this group of fans were against it. Unsurprisingly, I've got to say, since that letter was sent, there's been no response by the club. Absolutely no response. I'm not surprised at that. I don't know if you guys are. I'm not surprised at that. And this has been followed up by a statement yesterday, North Curve Boys Celtic Trust, the Green Brigade, saying that there's going to be a silent protest tonight, and if necessary, another one on Sunday against Motherwell. Now, there are some people saying this is wrong to do that, but my question would be, JP, at this stage, what else can we do? I mean, we're not rioting outside the ground. We're doing the right thing in terms of a silent protest, let's say. I don't sit in that area of the ground, but I think what you'll see is that other people within the stadium might respect it tonight, might be a wee bit different way of being a European game, JP. My question is, what else do you do?
I think it's a hard thing to ask everybody in the ground to observe. If it is the two sections that you mentioned that are observing it, then everybody's got a right to protest, especially against something like this that's so serious. And I did read last night a few tweets, and I don't know if it's just conjecture or speculation, but that it seems to be that an agreement has been made, that there was a contract signed, but it's not going to happen now.
Yes, I saw that.
I did see that. I
that's
can't,
gathering a bit of momentum, that, isn't it?
I can't obviously say that's fact. I mean, I've just genuinely just read someone's tweet, which could be complete nonsense, or it could have some spine to it. But I don't know. We'll wait and see. But with regards to the protest, I don't have a problem with people protesting, and I think I said this before, and I think people questioned me on it and made it out to be, one person questioned me on it and made it out to be nonsense. That doesn't mean to say that everybody thinks that. But after that half an hour of silence at the home game, as soon as this half an hour was up, there was an applause in the stadium, which to me indicated that the people applauding in the stadium applauded what had just happened by the Green Brigade, or the boys up in the top of the north stand. So that was what I took from that. Whether I've completely misunderstood that situation, I don't know. But I go to enough games and I'm able to read a crowd and know the feeling of a crowd well enough to know that was what that was responding to. So that was represented at the game. The signature in the letter has been represented by a great number of supporters clubs in a way that I don't think I've ever seen before. I mean, can you recall ever seen anything as robust and quite emphatic as this? I don't recall that. And it sent a clear statement, and hopefully we'll get a very clear answer, which is the one we're looking for.
The big thing on that point, JP, is we've spoken over the years. Obviously, our Celtic State of Mind's been running now for 4.5 years. There's loads and loads of interviews back in the early episodes that you'll find on the YouTube channel. Yes, that's a shameless plug to go and subscribe to it. With guys like Matt McGlone, Willie Wilson, Jim Orr, Tom Grant, David Lowe, people that were in and around the club or part of the movements, the street movements, the fan movements that overturned the Celtic board with the help of a wee guy in a bonnet as well. Never did get around to interviewing Fergus. I would love to do that.
Has to happen.
I imagine. But the thing with that is what you find when you talk to the people who were involved is that it wasn't universal. So Jim Orr, our very own Jim, he was involved in the very early movement, which was Save Ourselves, right? And what happened eventually was that movement, and you can watch the progress if you read through the early, not the views. You can watch the progress of how that movement it went off charging. It was charging down the tracks initially. They held a couple of meetings, and we've got the footage of the meetings. Are brilliant, by the way. And I don't know how much it's been shown in the past. It's archive footage. We're going to put it together for the YouTube channel. And Joe Beltrami speaks at the first one. Shettleston Halls. I'm not from the area, but I've been told it's no longer there. Tom Grant speaks. Brian Dempsey speaks brilliantly. And Willie Wilson's there, etc. So they're trying to build a bit of momentum. The next meeting, Terry Cassidy's invited and he attends. And Terry, in fact, Tom Grant didn't speak at the first one. He was there with Jimmy Farrell. And the second one, Terry Cassidy does speak. So they built up a right good bit of momentum. They got a lot of good press coverage, but then it kind of just tapered off. And then there was a second wave, and that was Celts for Change. So you had Save Ourselves, Celts for Change, and everybody knows what happens with that movement as well. So when I speak to these people, they say, they were maybe handing out flyers outside the ground. They were maybe trying to organise boycotts, which happens. There's a lot of people disagreed with them, and Jim Moore talks about people getting told outside the ground to F off and all this kind of stuff when they're trying to spread the word that there was something amiss at Celtic Football Club. So that's always going to happen. You're never going to have that universal appeal. But when, as JP says, Brian, you look at that letter and the signatories on it, it's as universal as anything I remember at Celtic from a fan's perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I'm not on social media at the moment, but anyone I've spoke to has said the same, that the Higgins appointment simply can't go ahead. It'd just be a huge slap in the face to every fan, every football fan, never mind any Celtic fan, that he's involved in football. So, I think it's been effective. And in terms of the silent protest tonight, I'm just wondering how much impact that will have on the board, given the fact that it's been very clear that the fans don't want Higgins on board. Is the protest designed to affect the team so it then affects the board? I don't think so. So I don't think there's any harm in it. As JP says, I think there was a real rousing reaction at the first one when that sort of half hour ended, and it didn't affect the team that day particularly, I don't think. So it's just interesting to see if in Europe you get the same unity, because maybe fans just coming over especially for that night. Maybe they don't go to games at the weekend, they'll go at night, something like that. Maybe a slightly different crowd that maybe aren't as followed on it, but I certainly agree with JP, agree with yourself. Not everyone's going to be for it, but I think it's the right platform and the right way to protest. As you say, you're no smashing up cars, you're no kicking off, you're no stopping people getting into the stadium, stuff like that. It's just a silent, protest to state the fact. And what puzzles me more than it all is why the Celtic board haven't come out with any sort of statement. It's such an easy win from a business perspective. Just say we're aware of, the negative attention this has received. He's not going to be on board. We take your thoughts and we take you as fans seriously, and we're listening to you, and we've acted accordingly. Even if he's not joining for that reason, they could spin it that way and make it an easy win. But there's such a, and I think it's disguised by the fact the team's playing well. It's the fact there's still such a huge disconnect from board to fan, and I don't think much has improved since last year when it was particularly bad. I just think the football's improved and it's masking it.
Yep.
Because they don't seem to. They care about the money, they care about the fans' money, but they don't seem to care about the fans' opinions, and that's something that has to change as much as the Higgins situation. The board's relationship with the fans has to change because it's borderline disrespectful.
I've seen, there's a few things here as well. Absolutely great points, Brian. Like, Why do a silence? Well, that's because Celtic fans have been met with silence since writing the letter. Why be silent on a European night? Well, that's because we've got a globally renowned atmosphere at Celtic Park, particularly on a European night under the lights. Everybody talks about it, so it's going to be filmed live. It's going to be broadcast all around Europe. Will that prompt somebody in the commentary team to say, "Oh, why is the Celtic fans not saying?" Because if it does, then that's exactly the effect that this silent protest is looking for. Like you say, Brian, they're not trying to affect anybody on the park. They're trying to make a point. They're making a point that this silence that you are currently hearing is the same silence we're hearing as fans from the CEO and from the wider club. I was thinking about the quick win based on the fact that we weren't great at communicating last year as a club, were we, Brian? And it could well just be that we just don't know how to, communicate very well. Or there might well be something around that fact that perhaps he had been offered or had signed a contract and it's going to come back kind of like negatively on him. Therefore, he has requested in the documentation, because it's a legally binding contract, etc. If it's going to be torn up, you don't make an announcement. I don't want people thinking that the Celtic fans have got one over on me, because as an individual, JP, that would be the worst case scenario for Higgins. I take that into account. There's legalities around the contract that Celtic might not be able to make a statement specifically about him, but they've got to make a statement of sorts to allay our fears. I mean, if the rumours are true and they're coming from a number of sources that he's not getting a job, then come out and tell us. Come out and tell us that there is a process underway and no one is due to be appointed. Do something so that we know as fans that the rumours are right, even if the club can't name them, because there will be legalities around naming them. That will be signed off in the paperwork with Higgins. There's no way he wants to be defeated by the Celtic fans. I mean, Police Scotland put out cops who were locking up Celtic fans and football fans, and the cops didn't have enough knowledge of the offensive behaviour, the Football Act, because what was happening was there was a whole songbook in their mind that was unacceptable, right? So people were getting locked up for singing particular chants, JP, but they're so nuanced that you need to know what each individual song entails, which is offensive and which isn't, right? And they cops that went out, particularly in the early days, and I'm sure they would have eventually sent them away for training and educated them a wee bit better, didn't have a clue if the Roll of Honour was offensive or not. They didn't know. They didn't know what the song was about. They didn't know the difference between Sean South and Kanye West. They were locking people up, at will. And they were ruining people's lives. What I would ask everybody to do that's tuning in, who has an interest in this, get on Twitter and watch the videos that have been posted by Fans Against Criminalisation. They're on the Twitter page. The last time I looked, there was 5 videos that went out, and they're case studies of people who have been negatively affected by the legislation that was, vociferously implemented by Higgins. So just go and watch that, because this is why so many Celtic fans are against it. You think about going to a football game and getting locked up in there, the impact that has on your life, your home life, your employment status, your future employment credentials. And that's exactly what was getting done here. Not because they were hooligans, because they might have gone in to an ultra setting. But JP, you and I have spoken in the past about ultra culture. I mean, that doesn't make you a hooligan because you're an ultra. It doesn't make you a hooligan because you've got a sensibility in terms of a political mindset. And I mean, football and politics goes hand in hand at Celtic Park. No one is able to extract that from Celtic Football Club. So the club need to make a statement, because tonight, loud and clear, the fans are making a statement, JP. I mean, I am buzzing to go to Celtic Park tonight, but I will look at that protest, that silent protest at this moment in time, is really being the only thing that the groups can do. I don't think there's another way of doing it. They've tried communicating and it's failed. The people who seem to have an issue with it are saying, well, just don't give them your money. But that's far more damaging to the club, surely. You can't stop us from going to watch the games.
No, I think the first thing that will come out is when they announce that they've appointed someone else, and that's the first we'll hear of it. Because, like you said, there'll be legalities and contractual things that are put in place that mean that they can't say anything about what's happened or what's not happened. So I think that'll be the first thing that comes out, and when that'll be, I don't know, because obviously they'll have to, look at. There's obviously a role or a job there that they want to fill, and they were considering doing it with Bernard Higgins, but they now need to fill it with somebody else. Surely, just the position's not just going to be, scrapped. I mean, there must be some position there to be filled. So the first thing that we'll ever find out about it is when some other random name is appointed, and then hopefully we can move on from this and put it down to experience. But as Brian said, the silence from the board has been deafening, and the communication has been, really, really poor. The ignoring Dominic Mackay at the AGM is one of the most mental things I've ever.
Just whitewashed it from the history.
As I watched that, I was like, they just said, "Oh, and we welcome Michael Nicholson." I'm like, no, but you also welcome somebody else and then let him go, and you're not giving us any reasons as to why that happened. Like, even a sanitized version of what happened got nothing. And yeah, watching those guys didn't fill me with confidence. And as well, Brian said as well about, that they'll happily take our money. There was not a comment made at the AGM. Somebody said something about, I'm from a family of X amount of season ticket holders or something like that. And then the guy, I think Bankier or Wilson, said, that's what we like to hear. We like to hear, the money, chiming in. And you're just like, wow. Yeah. What a terrible thing to say. What a terrible thing to say on such a forum. How to absolutely smash yourself in the face.
Oh, it was horrendous. I was in that fans forum, JP.
Yeah.
And it was quite early on.
Yeah.
And I'm not having a dig at the individual. He's a fan, like everybody else. But he basically said that there's 6 season tickets in his household and he'll be buying them regardless, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the exact words from Brian Wilson were, "That's what we like to hear."
It's a complete lack
of basically just buy the season tickets and shut up. And just sit there and just deal with it. That was basically the attitude, because Kevin Graham was in that separately. Because it was a dial-in.
Did he self-combust at that point?
Well, the good thing is, it's like you've got all the screens on the wall. It's like one of the big movies where there's going to be an aeroplane crash and all the screens start going out, and Kevin's raging, but he can't speak until they allow him to speak. You can see him. He's absolutely raging. And when Kev Graham finally, and by the way, the opportunity to plug Kev's book, Kevin's debut book is now available on Acsom.net. And it's all about the great Henrik Larsson done in a poetic style. And there's a wee nod to the Twilight Sad as well. So get on there, £10. We'll get it sent out to, Kevin will. I'll be too busy. On the 17th of December, and we'll get it sent out in time for Christmas. It's a tenner. And Kevin, once he finally got his chance to speak, he just asked them all to look out the window, because wherever they were, it was like the office above the entrance, and have a look at Brother Walfred, that statue of Walfred, and ask yourself, what would Brother Walfred do? We're all cheering, but you can't hear us because we're all muted at the time. But that's it. They're so far removed from the Celtic support. And that hasn't changed. There's a wee point coming up there, and I didn't want to labour about Neil Lennon. I wish Neil Lennon all the absolute best. But there was, and JP got stick last season for saying this, it was a perfect storm. Neil Lennon has to take responsibility, but so does everybody else around about him. And I think that given a different set of circumstances at a different club, I think that there's a job out there for him, and all the best when it comes. When we look back on some of the points that were made earlier on, Brian was talking about Liam Scales. There's a guy who hadn't really featured since he's come in, a few appearances here or there. He comes in against Dundee United and he stakes a claim. And my question would be, and I'll ask you first, JP, do you think he might save us a few quid on a new left back?
I hope so. I mean, everybody was hoping that was going to be the case. And then you listen to him speak in his interview when he arrived, and he just seemed so buzzing to be at Celtic. And, it was like a real dream come true for him. A guy from Ireland getting to play for Celtic and signing from Shamrock Rovers. It's not a story that you've heard too often, where we go and, maybe in the past, a long time ago, we took players from Ireland. You're probably better versed to tell me who those players were. I'm thinking of Paul Byrne, but I'm sure there's a slightly better calibre of player than Paul Byrne. Although Paul Byrne was decent.
He had a few moments.
Scored against Rangers, I remember that.
Twice, scored twice.
Aye. So Scales coming in was, I honestly, despite his, stock not being high, it's not as if we paid like a huge fee for him and he's, got all these, games under his belt for like a top club. He came in and all the chat that you heard from people who had watched him was, you've got yourself a player here. And, I was really, really happy he came on. I mean, you're not expecting your left back or your left wing back to score goals. But I mean, as soon as he moved you saw him moving into the park as he was as the play began. I saw him moving into the park, which is that inverted fullback thing, and I'm not that au fait with tactics or anything like that, but I saw him moving in and I thought he's going up here, and then when it felt him at the edge of the box, I was like, oh my god, you could see him going in to the middle of the park, and then it was a good finish. Yeah, it took a nick, but you make your own luck, and I'd like to see him get a chance tonight. Hopefully he does, and maybe we can call him a bargain. I mean, Ange talked yesterday about getting more bang for our buck. I mean, he's never been more right about anything, and people only need to point to the many failures in the transfer market that we've made in the past, and certainly in the past 10 years, there's been a lot of people that have come in and not performed and not contributed, and then left for either less than what we paid for them, or okay, credit to the club, we've managed to get money back on some of them, but a lot of them, we didn't get the wages back, did we? We get the transfer fee, we didn't get the wages back.
I know, Mo Bangura. I mean, there's a whole podcast on these guys that you could probably work out, how much it cost per game. Marian Sveds, Marvin the list is endless almost. But you're talking about more bang for your buck. You're looking at Daisen Maeda, Josuk, Aidaguchi, and Rio Hatate, and it looks as though in terms of the fees, anyway, Brian, we will be getting more bang for our buck for those guys. But you brought up Scales. What's your thoughts on him? I mean, obviously Taylor's back in the mix now, but he came on. I thought he was brilliant because it looked as though, obviously, Tommy Roderick's an absolute wizard, but the way he took his goal, it looked as though that might have been Segrist's weak point, bottom right, and it's exactly where Scales put it. It was so controlled. He never tried to put his foot through it. He just, he placed it in there. And I would like to see him tonight. But do you think that if he does put in a good performance, then we might think twice? You've said it before, Brian. We've got quite a few left backs. There might not be the kind of left backs that we want, but we do have Bolingoli in there as part of that mix as well. We've got Montgomery, who's impressed, and we've got Taylor as well. We now know that Juranovic can fit in there, and we've now got Scales. When you've got 5 personnel in one position, we're not going to go and strengthen again, are we? Although we do have a situation where if we do bring in Hatate, he can also go in at the left back. But again, I wouldn't expect Bolingoli to be here long term.
Yeah, Scales is an interesting one. I would actually like to see him at centre back. I know there's a bit of conjecture over what his best position is, but we don't have any left-footed centre-backs at the club at the moment. And we don't, actually, as good as Carter Vickers and Starfelt and Welsh have been, they're not the tallest either. Whereas I think Scales is like 6'3", 6'4". He's a big lad. He's got a lot of pace. And I think, especially in Europe, a pacey centre-half, nice balance to the team. We saw the difference in the balance where Juranovic and Taylor were the full-backs. And that's not like at Ralston, but it was a better balance in the team. And I think, actually, I would like to see Scales at centre-back tonight to see how he does there. Because I think Hatate's probably coming in to be the first choice left-back, if I'm honest, especially given the fact he can also play centre-mid, which suits the inverted full-back role perfectly. With Taylor is strong cover. Montgomery is probably a project. I actually like him further forward. So Scales I'd like to see centre-back, but we'll need to see. To be fair, I also thought we should re-sign Eric Sviatchenko, so I don't really know what I'm talking about, if I'm honest.
Listen, he had Edouard in his back pocket over 180 minutes, didn't he? And more, because it went into extra time, but I think by then Edouard had been hooked. Brown Warrior, I'm going to bring this up just to leave it at that. It's a nice bit of linkage. Thank you for coming in on YouTube. The fact the club have not dug deep for St Mary's tells you all you need to know about what they actually think of our history as a club. And that leads us on nicely to the fundraiser. I'll leave you with this. If you want one of these trackies or Kevin Graham's book, have a wee look on Acsom.net. if you want to give any kind of donation, however small, to the St Mary's Fund, the link is underneath the video. And I can't wait to give everybody the big update, which will probably be on Monday at some point, the final amount. Can we beat last season's or last year's total of 27k? That would be pretty phenomenal if we did. Listen, it's been absolutely tremendous. JP and I are going to get ready now to go through to the game. Brian, I hope you enjoy it where you are. And thanks everybody for joining us on a Celtic State of Mind.